Welcome to the show. This is Notepad. I'm your host Ibrahim Sani. Over the weekend, we've seen a viral video about J&T logistics company workers practically destroying consumer parcels at their sorting, factory. This, of course, has created a little bit of a hoo-ha on social media. And since then, the J&T workers have issued an apology in a video which strangely looks like a hostage video, if I were to joke about it. Anyway, here's the clip that we want to show you.
Kami daripada J&T Express Perak kebelakangan ini telah tular satu video di media sosial tentang pekerja tidak mengikuti SOP dan mencampak barang customer. Kami ingin memohon maaf dan kami ingin menjelaskan bahawa tiada isu dalaman ataupun potongan gaji antara pihak syarikat dan pekerja J&T Express Perak. Kami ingin menjelaskan bahawa kami tidak ada melakukan tindakan mogok. Kami ingin sekali lagi memohon maaf kerana telah menjejaskan nama pihak syarikat dan menjejaskan barang-barang rakyat Malaysia.
Anyway, after the apology that was issued by the workers, the company also issued a statement. I can put it up on the screen right now. Here's a statement of apology that is being issued by J&T, much of which is just a general apology. It's not about J&T per se, it's not about the logistics company per se, but whether or not the workers, the riders, the parcel sorters, the people that actually get your goods from point A to point B, whether or not they are well compensated, number one, and of course number two, of course, is whether or not they are well represented, i.e. through a labor union, whether somebody got their back, generally speaking. Those are the ideas that we want to share with you. And while we want to talk more about the workers per se, there's also the element of consumers and whether or not the consumers' rights are protected. According to the Deputy Minister of Ministry of Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs, aggrieved consumers can actually try out and go for the Tribunal for Consumer Claims. However, the Deputy Minister says that the option for consumers to go for the Tribunal for Consumer Claims have to be one of the more last resort kind of options. Consumers must first try to resort to finding a solution with the consumers themselves. Anyway, here is the Deputy Minister speaking about the matter.
Cuma saya ingin nasihatkan kepada pengguna yang mungkin barangnya terkesan kerana tindakan tersebut, mereka boleh mengadu kepada penjual ataupun mengadu kepada syarikat J&T. Kita tahu kes kerosakan barang mungkin di mana puncanya, dan jika mereka tak mampu menyelesaikan, artinya seller tak boleh selesai, syarikat courier tak boleh selesai, maka kita ada tribunal tuntutan pengguna, TTPM, Tribunal Tuntutan Pengguna Malaysia, untuk kita ambil tindakan dan kita tengok mana yang boleh kita bantu untuk memastikan pengguna tidak teraniaya.
Anyway, so that was the Deputy Minister talking about the matter further. It's not, the show that I'm going to build for this evening is not just about J&T, it's not just about the consumers, but whether or not the systems are there in place. And whether or not the systems are there in place to protect the rights of the riders and the delivery guys, and of course delivery ladies as well, and the consumers are well protected. We are entering a new age of e-hailing, ride-hailing, all the other stuff that we're using right now, e-commerce. 2021 is going to be defined as the year of e-commerce and defined as the year of e-hailing. Grab, for instance, is going for IPO. Are we well equipped in building an ecosystem where consumer rights are well protected? Those are the kind of things that we really need to talk about for this evening. So we'll go for a short break. When we come back, we have with us the YB of Bukit Gasing, YB Rajiv, joining us in the show, talking about this at length, trying to understand whether or not the systems that are in place is adequate, or whether or not we need to do something much more dramatic, like what he suggested, i.e. introducing a tribunal to judge and adjudicate the companies, e-hailing companies that is in the country right now. That's it for this. We'll go for a short break. When we come back, we'll have Rajiv on. Welcome back. This is Notepad. I have with me on the line the YB of Bukit Gasing, Rajiv Rishyakaran. Rajiv, thanks for joining us. Late on Sunday, you sent out a statement saying that it's time for e-hailing companies to be created a tribunal to actually adjudicate the kind of ongoings of these companies. Let's understand first the proposal that you are making before we jump into all the other questions first. Go ahead.
All right, so we have an industry that has boomed in recent years. We have a number of e-hailing companies and p-hailing companies, and that's what the government terms companies like Grab, Food Panda, Lala Move, Mr. Speedy, and so on. E-hailing is when these vehicles carry passengers, and p-hailing is when they carry parcels, be it your food, documents, or any other kinds of parcels. So both p-hailing and e-hailing companies have grown in recent years, and there's about an estimated 400,000 motorbike riders and car drivers, as well as a smaller number of van and other vehicle drivers that help make things work in this industry. So this industry is booming, and the call for a tribunal is to help adjudicate differences that arise between the riders and the platforms. And I think this is timely that the government steps up and gets this done to protect the interests of these 400,000 odd drivers and riders.
Yeah, that's the main point that I'm trying to get at, because yesterday we saw the Deputy Minister of Domestic Consumer saying that if there are people aggrieved, they can go on for the tribunal for consumer claims. And of course, what he's trying to address is if there is a consumer that is aggrieved, there is a tribunal for it. But what you're trying to propose is something that is different. You're not, while we have mechanisms to protect the consumer side of it, it's about the workers that you need to think about now. And,
exactly.
And is this tribunal trying to address that kind of segment of the population?
Exactly. So as a country, as a government, we already are familiar with tribunals. We have tribunals for all sorts of things as it stands, including the one that you just mentioned, the consumer tribunal. So if I'm a consumer, I buy a device and it doesn't work according to what it should, and the company doesn't want to service it or repair it, I can bring that shop to the tribunal and get my money back or get my product fixed. That has been established for quite a number of years. But this is another problem that the consumer tribunal does not service unless the government chooses to expand the scope of the consumer tribunal. That is the workers' side. Now, these so-called riders, they are partners of Grab, Food Panda, Lala Move, and so on. They are contractors. They are not deemed as employees, although it is already arising in a number of Western countries that these partners should be considered as employees. Now, some of them work part-time. A lot of them work full-time in this industry, and thus they deserve some level of protection. And I think the government should step up to ensure that these guys who depend on these businesses for their rice bowl, their source of income, it's about time we put in some protection for them to give them avenues to address their concerns. Now, if you're an employee out there and you get terminated by a company or demoted by a company for whatever reason, you could take legal redress in the industrial court. That's available to you as an employee. Now, what about these guys who are Grab drivers full-time? What about the guys who ride motorbike for Lala Move full-time? Do they have such recourse? Now, the recent incident that's on everyone's mind that I think went viral all over WhatsApp and social media is what happened with J&T. Now, the company came out to make a statement that these workers who were rioting in the warehouse and throwing stuff and everything had disputes to the bonus payment. Now, that's exactly the point. When you have disputes with regards to bonus payment, when you have disputes with regards to any other KPI or financial payouts, where can you go? Is your only source of channeling your frustration to throw a riot in the warehouse? I think that should not be the way. I think there should be a platform for them to seek solutions and adjudication for these grouses and disputes that they have between themselves as an individual driver against these huge companies which run these platforms.
When we had the CEO of Food Panda Malaysia on this show a few weeks ago, I was talking about a parallel to this, which is California Prop 22, which talks about how we can classify the gig workers not as contractors but as employees. But as we can all know now, during the November 2020 vote, that proposition was defeated. Basically, they are continued to be classified as contractors. And when I asked him that question, he was talking about the idea of gig workers and gig economy to a point where it was clear that the reason why these companies exist is because they allow for opportunities for employment and gainful employment in a way, where you can have a day job or not, but at the same time you can double up your work as participants of the gig economy, i.e. being a e-hailing rider or partner, whatever nomenclature that you use right now. Why do we need to alleviate, not alleviate, pardon me, why do we need to elevate the rights of a gig worker contractor to what we're looking at right now as an employee? What would be some of the ideas that you want to share here?
All right, I think there are many levels to this. I think what's happening in California and what's happening in a lot of Western countries is elevating these contractors or these riders into full-time employees and all the rights and benefits that come with it. And I think here in Malaysia, what a lot of riders are crying out for is not that. I mean, that would be wonderful for a lot of riders if they get full employee protection, such as you can't be terminated and so on, full medical benefits and everything else. But they're not going so far. And I think what they would be happy for a start is an avenue to solve problems, to solve disputes. Now, when you have a dispute with regards to bonus payment, company says you need to fulfill certain KPI, delivery on time 90% before bonus payment is paid out. If you have a dispute, if you insist that you've made 90% on time deliveries, the company says, no, you made 88%, so I'm denying you the bonus. That's just one example. Do you have any avenue to seek redress to these grounds that you have? So what's unfortunate is we don't have that avenue. We can't expect riders to take this matter to court, file a case in high court. That's just not possible. So what's next? Most of the time, the riders just have to accept the fact that whatever payment that is cut, whatever bonus that is cut, is just their terrible misfortune. Sometimes if the level of frustration rises extremely high, like what we saw over the weekend, then that happens. They riot, they strike. But would be so much better if we as a country and we as society try to protect the rights of these riders. We're not saying that J&T, we're not saying Lalamu, Food Panda needs to pay the riders so much more money for the job that they're doing. We're not saying that they need to hire them as full-time employees. I think we all recognize the economy is changing. Gig economy is here to stay. On-demand employment is here to stay. I think we recognize that people will love to work part-time, people love flexibility of hours, and all these things are well and good. So those things can remain. Now, what I think is the most basic protection a country can offer is a good judiciary. So a good judiciary adjudicates problem. Now, when big company A fights big company B, they have no problem hiring lawyers and going to high court and solving their disputes. It's very cost effective for them to do so. But when a rider has a problem with his platform, say Lalamove, he can't take Lalamove to court. There's just no way a motorbike rider servicing Lalamove can afford to bring Lalamove to court. It's just not practical and not feasible. So do we then say that, too bad for you, because you'll never be able to afford to hire a lawyer to take Lalamove to court? You must accept any rule, regulation, change in bonus, any dispute settlement that Lalamove puts on you as final, and there's no redress to it. I think that's not right. I think we should stand up for the little guy, and it's not just one or two little guys. You're talking about 400,000 riders and drivers, not just in KL, but throughout the country. So give them an avenue. Give them an avenue for them to seek solutions or to seek redress, adjudication from a neutral third party.
But your call is for the federal government to make this work. Let's work within the powers that you have as a state assemblyman of Selangor. Do you think that the state government at least can do something within its own powers to make sure that this can take place in the state? How does that work between state and federal in terms of creating tribunals?
Yeah, but unfortunately, this area is under the purview of the Ministry of Human Resource and the Ministry of Transport. Our constitution is such that these powers are delegated to the federal government. The state government has plenty of powers, but not in this aspect. And thus, it's why I call on the federal government to set this up.
Let's finally talk about the issue of J&T per se, because just before we went into the break just now, and we had you on, we were showing about the J&T workers apologizing. We also showed the statement that you alluded to earlier about J&T apologizing. It seems like, and when we wanted to get J&T on the show, they declined coming on the show. It's about the issue of trying to get more clarity on the matter, because as you can read over the past few days, it's more of a dispute of pay, and it's not about J&T per se, it's about the system per se. And with having such a tribunal, for instance, do you feel like these matters can be resolved in the long run, or you're just trying to address a small problem at a small time, or do you think that this is more of a structural change that we can see a better creation of an ecosystem for this kind of gig economy to flourish in the country in the near term?
Okay, I think if you create a tribunal, two things will happen. I think the first thing is these big companies will be more mindful in how they solve disputes with their riders. So currently, all these companies from Grab, Foodpanda, Lalamove, J&T, they have the final say in any dispute management. If any dispute arises from the rider, including things like cutting the bonuses, including suspension from the platform for, say, 1 week or 1 month due to certain performance issues and so on, the riders have no recourse and the platforms have the ultimate say. That's because the riders can't take this grouse anywhere else. So I've heard Grab drivers coming to me as an ADUN and talking about how they were terminated from the platform and they feel the termination was unfair, but they've got nowhere to go. So I'm not here to single out any one platform. I believe the platform will continue to try to portray as good an image as possible, and that's very well for them. But what I'm talking about is the 400,000 drivers and riders. Now, how will they be treated should a tribunal come up? And I believe the companies will, first of all, be fairer to them from the onset, because if the grouse is not solved internally, the riders or the drivers can easily and affordably bring this to a tribunal, where a neutral third party will hear from both sides and make an adjudication. And I think that's much fairer for a neutral third party to make the final adjudication than to have the platform owner who has a vested interest in the dispute to make the final adjudication. So in the interest of justice, this is largely contract resolution. And we're talking about contract resolutions in micro amounts. So we're not talking about disputes of millions of ringgit or hundreds of thousands of ringgit, where both parties can easily afford to hire lawyers. We're talking about dispute resolutions, contract dispute resolutions of 300 ringgit, 500 ringgit, which means the world to a lot of these riders. It means a huge deal to their monthly income. And if we provide that platform for these disputes to be resolved and addressed and judged by a neutral third party, I think we'll be a much fairer country, a much fairer society. So yes, gig economy is here to stay. I'm not trying to take away from that, but we need to be fair to the 400,000 people working in this gig economy.
Yeah, people don't realize that the number is huge, 400,000 people here. Look, it's natural for companies to have some sort of a pushback against a tribunal creation. I can understand that fact. But what do you think is going to be some of the challenges of the federal government in executing the tribunal as per what you are calling for right now?
I think the biggest thing is dealing with the objections from the companies. I'm sure there'll be a lot of lobbying. A lot of these companies have established very strong lobbying tentacles into the government to enable them to get their businesses up and running in the first place. So I think that'll be the biggest challenge of all. I think the second one is to get the ministers, both Minister of Transport and the Minister of Human Resources, to pay attention to their work and not just endlessly politic and scramble for their survival in their Perikatan government. And if they pay a bit of attention to this scope, which is under their jurisdiction, I think it should not be too difficult to get a tribunal up and running in a matter of months.
Okay, finally we talk about the rising unemployment figures. Yesterday, the Department of Statistics Malaysia announced that the unemployment rate is at 4.8% for the fourth quarter of last year. This is consistent with the high numbers that have been registered since second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. We're looking at over 770,000 people currently being unemployed or being underemployed. this number doesn't seem to, shrink in the first quarter of this year. I mean, I have no data for this quarter, but you and I would apply common sense, and we would know that the number is going to be still about 700,000, 800,000. Do you feel that we are putting the risk of the livelihood of these 400,000 currently employed ride-hailing drivers at a risk if we proceed with a tribunal like this, because we might spook these kind of hailing companies?
No, I really don't think so. I really don't think we will spook these companies. I think in Malaysia, this is not 5 years ago. These companies are well established in Malaysia. Food Panda, Grab, Lalamove, Bungkusit, Mr. Speedy, the list goes on and on. They are well established. It is not about deterring new investors to come in and set up platforms. It's about providing some amount of protection to the existing riders. We will not change the financial model of these companies too largely, because we're not talking about forcing them to pay certain medical insurance. We're not talking about forcing them to pay a certain higher minimum wage. We're not disturbing any of that with this suggestion. We're just talking about dispute resolutions here. I really don't see that reducing the employment. And in fact, at this time of high unemployment, where the number of riders is higher than probably what the system needs, this is extremely important to protect the riders who are vulnerable, because platforms have no problem dismissing riders that are problematic in that sense. Platforms have no problem just discarding riders that they do not want, because there's the ample supply of new people always trying to get in. So all the more reason to protect the interest. I'm not talking about changing the business model upside down. I'm just talking that if you promise a certain incentive, you should be honoring it to the riders. I think that's the fundamental contract law that should be upheld. And the only way to enforce this is you must have a tribunal, you must have a mechanism where a third party, a neutral third party, can adjudicate and decide on disputes.
Thank you, YB. Final question, how do you think you're going to move forward on this one, other than the statement that you're coming on air right now and talking about this? What's the next step to make this a reality?
I call for it. I mean, I'm grateful that you've given airtime to this topic. I think it needs to be discussed. I'd be very happy to talk about it on any other media. But for now, there are two ministers that are sitting at the seats of the Ministry of Human Resource and the Ministry of Transport. They should do their job. If not, we'll be working very hard to replace them very soon.
Thank you very much. That was YB Rajiv Rishyakaran, the ADUN for Bukit Gasing. We are going to continue to keep this issue we talked about on the show. As per normal, this is a show that talks about technology as well as business, and perhaps this is one of the more pressing issues that needs to be resolved right now. If you've missed any part of this interview, just head on to Astro AWANI, look for Notepad over there. Also, you can search for J&T on astroawani.com. There are plenty of news covering this topic on this matter as well. Until then, thanks very much for watching, and goodbye.